Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL Draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and as always, joined in by prospect experts Peter Baracchini and Dayton Reimer. We got the band back together for episode here. Just Dayton and I were last week, but welcome back, Peter. How's it going?
Going good. Yeah, I had a little busy plate the last few weeks, but everything's sort of calmed down right now. So just happy to getting back to talking prospects right now.
For sure. Yeah, we're gonna do a thing we were going to do last week, but it's better with there's more people. So yeah, it's gonna be fun to do that. Dayton, how's it going?
It is good, yes. Things have kind of freed up for me, so I've been diving into a little bit of World Juniors. I'm taking that on for the Hockey Writers this year, which is going to be super fun. I love World Juniors. That's like I think it's my favorite tournament of the year. It's
It's for sure, and it's back in Canada this year too. So it was overseas last year, which kind of hard when you're trying to cover the games. They're really early in the morning or really late at night. I guess whatever you want to. I guess more early in the morning for a lot of people. Yeah. So this time it's going to be at manageable times. You'll be able to watch them. A lot of the games, so that's going to be fun. It's always great when it's in North America, and I think the next one is too, if I'm not mistaken. I think it might be in the States.
Might be.
But yeah, off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, it's going to be fun this year in Canada again. So, and the 2025 draft, not a lot of guys will be in that tournament, World Juniors, and maybe a few, but we're going to dive into the 2025 draft again in this episode and do our head-to-head, which was fun last year, kind of going one player against another. Which one would you draft if you were given the choice? And we'll jump right in with the top guys. And there's going to be some repeat names, but they're going to go against different players for the different ones to start here. So I'll start with you, Peter. We're going to go with James Hagens and Porter Martone as a head-to-head here for a first overall pick. If given the choice as a GM, looking up, coming up to the podium, and these two guys are still available, well, of course they would be as the first overall pick. Who would you choose? And give a rationale why you would choose them.
It's kind of funny because I looked over the document that you sent and I'm like, man, Matt's really going all out with the very first head-to-head matchup because this is going to be very, very tough for the first three because it's basically a 3-horse race for first place right now. Like, we all thought that James Hagens, after his standout U18 performance, he was going to be the number one pick. But after the start that Martone and Misa had this season, it's kind of looking a little bit, iffy right now. Their number one is not set in stone right now, which is really difficult. But trying to answer your question in Hagens versus Martone, it's really tough because you have a very, very high IQ, very skilled centerman in Hagens that you just can't overlook. But then you see the highly skilled power forward game that Martone has and the Kachuk-like attitude and willingness to win and battle every single time. Teams absolutely love that, but they also love those smart, skilled players. So it really is interesting to see how that'll play out. At the moment, Hagens is still number one for me. I would probably take him right now, but it is a very, very slim margin because I would even take Martone number one right now if that was the case. So Hagens by at a 51% margin compared to Martone 49 or even 50-50 at that matter because it is very, very close. That one's a very tight one.
It is really tight, especially they're both started off seasons really well as well. So it's not like one's pulled back at all. So yeah, it's going to be a tough one if this continues throughout right up to draft day. We might have a pretty, not sure for the first time in a while of who's going to get picked first overall. Dayton, what about you between these two guys? If you're a GM coming up to the podium, who would you choose between Hagens and Martone?
Well, if I'm a GM, I am always going to go for speed and intelligence first, and that's what Hagens has, especially over Martone. Martone, I think, lacks a little bit of speed. Some of the clips I was watching, he looks a little lumbering when he's skating. Excuse me. I don't think he is. I just compared to someone like Hagens, who is so fast and slick and like can make decisions so unbelievably quickly. He's a guy who can change the game around him, and like change how the flow is. So I think I would pick him. I'm a little bit more convinced than Peter right now. Maybe like a 65-35. Not 100% convinced. Because Martone, like Peter said, is a crazy good prospect. He's been tearing it up in the OHL. He has that really, really powerful game that like you just can't stop him when he gets the puck. And he does have good skating and good speed. It's not great compared to someone like Hagens. And so that's who I'm going for.
All right, so James Hagens takes that matchup, and we're going to continue it with another one. James Hagens going up against Michael Misa. And Misa started off on fire with the Saginaw Spirit in the OHL. And he's really bumping himself up into that conversation of first overall. It might be a three-horse race once we get to draft day. So I'll start with you, Dayton, on this one. You picked Hagens over Martone. Would you pick Hagens over Misa?
I would, yes. I think Misa has a much better shot. It like that's a rifle. It just like he gets it and he puts it in the net. There's no like there's people in front. No, it's not. It's just in the net. But Hagens has that really high end creativity that he can move the puck through people and create the space that he needs to make incredible plays. He's a great, passer. He's a pretty good shooter. I didn't see that as much from Misa, so Hagens is still above him for me.
All right, Peter, you got Hagens over Misa, or would you pick Misa?
Again, if I'm a GM, it all depends if you're going for the playmaker or the goal scorer right now. But
Yeah.
then again, Misa was a prototypical playmaker early on in his career where he rounded out that shooting aspect of his game right now, where it just seems like he's always finding the right spots and putting himself in the right spot to get into those open lanes, taking advantage of other teams' mistakes, which is what you want to see in a player. You want to exploit those weaknesses. But like Dayton said, the creativity, the deceptiveness that Hagens possesses, the ability to draw players in and open things up and still pull off highlight reel moves is absolutely impressive of what he's able to do. The edge work that he has to avoid high pressure situations. The IQ is there. Again, not to say that Misa doesn't have the IQ, because like I mentioned, he's able to find an open space to put himself in a good shooting spot. But Hagens is a pass first kind of guy, but he is very, very accurate with that playmaking. So, and both are really quality skaters too. I know you mentioned the weakness or like Martone not having the best speed, but both Hagens and Misa do have that edge over Martone right now, where they're both really good skaters and they have that speed. But I will take Hagens over Misa at this point. But again, it's I would say it's a little bit further away from me with Hagens and Misa, kind of like that 65-35 with Hagens over Misa, a little bit closer with Hagens and Martone, but I would definitely take Hagens over Misa.
All right, so James Hagens still first overall pick in your minds, right? I would probably say the same. I mean, Hagens is he's so impressive as an all-around player too. So I think right now he's got the edge, but it is quite close. I mean, it's not going to be like slam dunk. He's definitely first overall pick. I think it'll depend on the team as well that ends up with that pick. Like if it's San Jose again, would you go with Hagens when you already have Macklin Celebrini? I mean, 1-2 punch, that's pretty crazy. You already have Will Smith as well. So it's like, I don't know, San Jose would have a pretty big pick. I mean, Martone's a centerman too. Misa's the only winger out of that. So, I mean, I'd say it would depend on the team, if what need they have, and who they feel is the better prospect. So, yeah, it's going to be really fun, I think, if this ends up being the same, where they all stay around the same. We're going to be we're not going to really be sure who's going to be picked first overall, which is really fun for us covering the draft. All right, so Hagens will be first overall. Let's go between the two guys, Porter Martone and Michael Misa, which could be the second overall pick. Peter, who would you pick between those two, Martone and Misa?
Again, it's really close. I mean, like it's like you said, there's no concrete number one. It's like the last few years where we've already had, Connor Bedard number one, Macklin Celebrini
Yeah.
number one. We know that those players are going to go number one. Now there's a little bit of uncertainty here, but I did have Porter Martone ahead of Michael Misa in my early preseason rankings. I'm still going to have Martone over Misa at this point, even if it is Hagens one, Martone two, Misa three. I would still have Martone over Misa, mainly because again, it's not like there's no lack of, you know, commitment or lack of ability to win, because Misa's doing everything he can. Like, he's putting the team on his shoulder, scoring 23 goals. But so is Martone. But he has that. I think that little bit of edge and physicality will resonate with a lot of teams more, and it certainly resonated with me because I saw him live, and he was just an absolute, powerhouse of a right wing player for the Brampton Steelheads in that game against the London Knights. And seeing him live was very, very impressive. Like, just at the pace that he's able to play with, it's very quick, it's very fast. He can play in all situations, power play, penalty kill, you name it. He's very impressive overall, and I think he just has that little bit of an edge over Misa, as I would still take him second overall compared to Misa.
Yeah, I mean those top three teams are gonna have a pretty good that 1, 2, 3, I think is gonna end up be those three players. Just which order are they gonna be in? Dayton, what order would you put them in? Martone or Misa, if you had the chance to pick one of these guys.
Like, I don't mean to be boring, but I'm also going to go with more Martone ahead of Misa. He does have that really powerful game. I think James Hagens makes things happen with his deceptiveness and his ability to get around players and create that space. Martone makes the space by just pushing people out of the way. He has a stronger game. He's much better at getting in front of the net and creating that space because you can't move him. At 6'3", he has that strength that you'd want in a center to be more of like that top six guy. I don't know if Misa has that right now. I didn't see a lot of clips where he was doing a lot of great playmaking. It was mainly just goals. So maybe I needed to find some different clips. Great goal scorer. I just didn't see the more well-rounded game that I caught from Martone.
Yeah, I mean, it is also different positions. You got a center and a winger. And Misa's probably, like you said, more a goal scorer. And of course, you definitely need those guys that you definitely have in the lineup, and you know that they're gonna generate chances every game. So that's a tough one, Martone Misa. I mean, again, it'll depend on the team that needs a center or a winger. Needs a goal scorer, need more of a more well-rounded guy. It's going to be, I know you said don't draft by need, but it does come into play when you're looking at such guys that are so close in skill level and talent. So that's going to be interesting to see where they all fall in that top three for sure. All right, let's move to some other guys. And these are all kind of ranked around the same areas. So looking at, so Roger McQueen and Ivan Ryabkin, again, center and a winger, but, or no, both centers, I mean. So this is a perfect comparison. Ivan Ryabkin and Roger McQueen. I'll start with you, Dayton, because you really like McQueen. Would you pick McQueen over Ryabkin at this point?
I would. Not to like Ryabkin is a fantastic player. He has that, that silky smooth abilities to get around guys that I've seen in like Demidov and Michkov. A similar style. He doesn't quite have the high end that those other two do, but he's already at kind of the same level that those were at the MHL and in, I guess, the Russian juniors, right? McQueen, I haven't been able to watch live, which sucks because I've seen the Brandon Wheat Kings twice already this year. And I can't, because he's always injured. So I had to look up some clips. He is a fantastic guy who, again, like Martone, makes space with his size. He has some really great hands, though, making moves in front of the net. He has a great shot. His skating is maybe the worst of the guys we've talked about so far. It's still fine. He's a strong skater. He just takes a couple of strides to get up to his full speed, whereas the others can get up to a speed quicker. but I like McQueen a little bit more than Ryabkin at this point. I think his size and skill combination makes him a really interesting guy. I'm very much against drafting a guy just because he's big. Like
Yeah.
you can find big players anywhere in the draft. Don't waste a first round pick on it. Get the guy who has the skill because that's a lot harder to train.
Mhm. Yeah.
McQueen has that. He has that really high end intelligence. He has that, ability to make plays and to create the space with deft puck movements. And then he also has a really great frame as well. So
Mhm.
that's why I'd take him over Ryabkin.
Yeah, I mean, Ryabkin has he's much smaller. He's only 6 feet, and
Mhm.
McQueen's 6'5". So that's a pretty big difference in size for sure. All right, Peter, what about you? Are you going different here, or are you gonna go with McQueen as well?
No, I'll go with McQueen. And I had Ryabkin at the beginning of the season, but McQueen's hot start, despite the injury, it's hard to overlook what he's able to do because there's a bit more of not necessarily a larger sample that I've seen with McQueen compared to Ryabkin, but there has been, a bit of a drop off with Ryabkin's play as of late, where maybe he's not as scoring goals as much. Um, you know, off the puck awareness is getting a little bit concerned right now, where it's not as great as that compared to McQueen, where he seems to be a little bit more complete overall. Again, Dayton mentioned his skating. Again, probably not the best in terms of um, in terms of mechanics and everything like
Mm.
that, but he does have decent speed to create that separation, put himself in good spots no matter what. The vision and awareness is there. I would give McQueen that edge right now over Ryabkin. That's not to say I don't love Ivan Ryabkin. I like the game that he brings because he still brings that physical element. It's just there's some other factors that are, pushing him a little bit further down the top 10 right now. Whereas McQueen has already cemented himself as probably a top 10 pick despite the injury.
Mhm. And also, like, he can skate at 6'5", even though it's not. I mean, there could be some concerns there, but at 6'5", that and being able to have not be slow. I mean, it is a big thing in the NHL where there's a lot of guys that actually you need to be able to skate when you're big now. I mean, you can't get away with being a slow player, or you're probably capping out as a fourth line guy or an AHL call up, and so you need to be able to skate if you have that size. All right, let's move to some defensemen. And I mean, there's a couple that are in this range. We got Matthew Schaefer. We'll go Matthew Schaefer versus Logan Hensler. Hensler's usually ranked a lot lower than him. But these are the two of the top defensemen in these. They're probably be two of the guys that be picked first. So, Peter, who would you go with at this point, Matthew Schaefer or Logan Hensler?
I think this is the one where maybe more clear cut. I think Matthew Schaefer is miles ahead better than Logan Hensler at this point. Logan Hensler has kind of had like a little bit of a slow start to the
Mm,
NCAA with the transition period being a little bit static, where he doesn't look as confident. Seems to be a little bit of a step behind, but with Matthew Schaefer, the dominance is there. Unlike the Gretzky Cup, yeah, I know he dealt with mono, but even when he came back, dominance is still there. He has 11 points in 9 games right now, and it seems like he really hasn't missed a step. He hasn't missed a beat at all. Where a couple games where he's gone pointless, but he's made up for it. With he's come back with multi-point efforts, and the consistency is there. Where he's able to join the rush, lead it, be a factor in transition. He's got a strong defensive awareness as well. He's a complete package player, and many wondered how much of his draft stock would take a hit as a result of him missing a couple of weeks because of the illness, but it seems like it's not affecting his play at all. So it's definitely going to be Matthew Schaefer for me.
Yeah, he had usually ranked a lot higher on a lot of rankings, so he probably a pretty clear cut at this point. Dayton, are you the same thing? You got Matthew Schaefer as your first pick?
Yeah, I do. I think it is a lot closer than the rankings would suggest, though. Yes, Logan Hensler hasn't had a great start with Wisconsin. He's only got 2 assists in 9 games. That still puts him
Mm,
seventh on the team, though. I don't know if Wisconsin's doing all that great. I haven't checked the NCAA standings recently, but he seems to be doing okay comparatively.
mm.
Um, and my goodness, does he have speed? That guy can fly up the ice like nothing. I don't know if he's quite at Tanner Mollendijk levels yet. Because watch clips, guys. It's so good. Um, but yeah, like he has really, really great speed, really great movement. Um, I think he needs to work a little bit on his all-around presence, which is where Schaefer beats him. Schaefer does have some really good speed as well, and he is able to be a bit more impactful on all the areas, which I didn't quite see from Hensler. So I do take Schaefer first. I don't wait too much longer on Hensler though.
Yeah, they'll probably be picked pretty close together. We'll see how close, but yeah, I think Schaefer's probably gonna be the first one off the board as a defenseman. It's not as heavy defense as the last draft, which we saw so many. It's a lot more forward heavy as usual. I mean, most of the time it is. But yeah, those two defensemen definitely we watch in the first 15, I would say. And Schaefer maybe in the top five-ish. Once those three forwards are gone, he could be one of the next ones out. All right, let's to the battle of the short kings, and we'll start. So this is Adam Benak, 5'7", and Cam Schmidt, 5'8". Both really small, but very skilled, and both. I mean, Benak had that great under 18s, not under 18s. Hlinka Gretzky, his record-setting performance at the Hlinka Gretzky, where he had 21 points in 5 games, which is insane. And then you got Cam Schmidt, who's been ridiculous with the Vancouver Giants. So, Dayton, who would you pick between these two guys? They're ranked pretty close together on a lot of rankings, but who would you pick first?
I think I'm going with Schmidt. I maybe that's a little bit of WHL bias coming out. But I did watch Benak's highlight clips. He does have some really good speed. He's got a really good shot. I just like Schmidt's finishing ability a little better. I think he has the ability to get that first shot off really well. And from what I saw, like 9 times out of 10, that's going in the back of the net. And if it's not, he's right there to put it back in and pick up his own rebound. I didn't quite see that from Benak as much. He had a really good, like he's a better passer, I think, at least from what I saw. He can set up guys really well, but his shot just didn't quite have that finishing. And if I'm picking a pure goal scorer, I'm going with Schmidt.
Yeah, Schmidt's got 20 goals in 17 games
That's
to
insane.
start this season. He had 31 last season, so he's on pace for quite a bit more than that right now. Peter, what about you? Are you going for these two small guys?
I Yeah, it's definitely going to be Cameron Schmidt for me. I think when you're teetering around that 5'6", 5'7", 5'8" range, like Benak and Schmidt are, I feel like you need to have a little bit more of an assertiveness to your game, a little bit more of that willingness to drive and power through. I see that a lot more with Cameron Schmidt, and I saw that at the Hlinka Gretzky Cup. I'm seeing that right now with the Vancouver Giants. Benak seems to be a little bit more passive, where maybe if he does get smothered, the size factor does come in, where maybe he's not as strong. I think Cameron Schmidt is a much stronger player than he is, given the fact that he's able to use that size to his advantage, where maybe it may not show it, but he definitely shows that he can handle his own, given his size and stature, a little bit more better than Adam Benak. Um, I know both are kind of ranked a little bit lower, 20s and down. But I feel like Cameron Schmidt has the potential to be top 15 right now. And it's really showing early on. Again, you don't want to make assumptions too early, but I think he's starting to solidify that for himself. I know scouts are going to look over the fact that going to look at the fact that, yeah, 5'7", not great enough, but he definitely could hold his own, and that size factor doesn't seem to be an issue for him.
Yeah, he's one of those guys. I think, I mean, he'll probably drop from where he probably should be drafted, but I don't think he's dropping out of the first round. He's not going to be one of those guys. At least you never know, though. I didn't think Logan Stankoven would drop out of the first round, and he did. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. But he definitely has the skill, and what he's showing this season, he definitely has that pedigree to be a top 15 pick. Whether he'll be drafted there is another story, because teams still don't get it. The smaller guys, it shouldn't be a problem anymore, but definitely still is. All right, let's do these other two guys. So this is I mean, there's some rankings that don't have them close together, but others have them close. So Cullen Potter and Cole Reschny. So Dayton, I'll start with you. Who would you pick between these two?
This one kind of almost came down to a coin flip to me. I think they play very similar games, but I saw one really great highlight of Cullen Potter, so that's who I'm going for. I think he's got a really good potential. He seems to be a really solid mid first round pick. Just kind of like where Cole Reschny is. Some guys have him are really high on him. I just haven't seen as much to be really wowed with Reschny. And the I think Potter has been doing really well in Arizona State. So that's my pick.
All right, Peter, who are you going with between Reschny and Potter?
Yeah, I feel like the gap has kind of closed a little bit more. I know Reschny didn't have the best start to this season, but he's kind of picked it up offensively. And I think both are that, highly skilled two-way kind of players, but play that puck possession style very, very well. Um, I'll give the slight edge to Cole Reschny, mainly because of the fact that he's I don't want to say he's stronger in terms of like when he has the puck, where he uses that size to his advantage a little bit more. I know Cullen Potter has that speed aspect to his game, but I just like the way that Reschny kind of creates that separation for himself, the way he protects the puck a little bit better. So he's going to be my pick for that.
All right. I'll start with you, Dayton, on that. I mean, give us a matchup. I mean, I gave you all the ones that I kind of came up with, but I mean, there's so many different guys. Do you have one that you want us to go over?
Yeah, I've been closely following one guy in the WHL who I think should be ranked a lot higher than he is, and that's Lynden Lakovic. Um, but then there's a guy in the OHL who also probably should be ranked a little higher than he is, which is Jake O'Brien. Is
Jake
it Jake?
O'Brien, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just blanking on his first name. There's too many O'Briens around. So those two guys, who would you take, Lynden Lakovic or Jake O'Brien?
All right, Peter, who would you go
Ooh,
with?
that is a very good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's two completely different player skill sets,
Mhm.
but I'm throwing out that Helena Gretzky Cup for Jake O'Brien because you're not going to base everything off one tournament. I know it kind of may have impacted the rankings just a tad bit, but the way that he sees the ice is very, very great. I mean, the playmaking, the skill set, he's added that shooting element to his game. He's tied him, I guess, he's got the same amount of goals and assists right now, which is great to see that he's rounding out his game a little bit more offensively. But Lynden Lakovic is just an absolute force and
Mm.
powerhouse right now. I mean, that's really, really tough. Again, if I was a scout, you're probably going to go for the size and power, but Jake O'Brien has the smarts, and it's hard to pass that up the way that he sees the game so well. Um, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna give the slight edge to Jake O'Brien this time.
I'm the other way. I'm going the slight edge to Lyndon Lankovic. I really like his size and that power forward type game he plays. So 10 goals, 26 points in 21 games to start with the Moose Jaw Warriors. I already is pretty close to his 18 that he had last season. And yeah, looking like he's improved a lot since his first season, or I guess it would be second full season or first full season. He only played 37 games in 22-23. So, yeah, he's getting better and improving. So I'm going to give the very small edge to him on this one. Peter, do you have a matchup for us?
It took a while for me to find one, but I do, and it's the rise of two defenders that seem to be a little bit out but could push their way into the first round, and that is Carter Amico from the national team development program. Has 3 assists in 13 games with USA U18, and Cameron Reid has, I believe, 14. He's fourth in OHL scoring. I'm sorry, I'm getting an ad on the OHL site that really threw me off for the OHL Eras concert because Taylor Swift taking over OHL. He's a point per game with the Kitchener Rangers right now, and he's a left shot defenseman. Carter Amico's a right shot defenseman, but both of them are really skilled puck moving defenders. I'm curious to see who you guys would take.
Dayton.
Sure. I think at this point I would go with Cameron Reid. He is the left shot. Right shots are quite nice, but
Mm.
19 points in 19 games is a very good number for a defenseman. Puts him fourth on the team, leads the defenseman on the Rangers, and they have a pretty solid team from what I've been tracking, unless I'm a
Mhm.
little out of touch with the OHL. You guys would know maybe a little better, or at least Peter might.
Nope, really good team.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, I mean Luke Ellenis with the Senators. I've been watching him a little bit, and he slowed down a little, but man, he had a great start, just putting goals in all the time. Um, yeah, so I think Cameron Reid is going to be my pick. He's for me a little bit better of a puck mover.
I'm going with Amico because of the right hand shot. I think it's just so. I mean, there lately, the last two drafts has been a lot of right hand shot defensemen available. You say it's rare, but it seems to be not as rare lately. But yeah, I'm just going with that because I mean they are both pretty similar type defensemen. But that right shot kind of tips the scales a bit for me. So I'm gonna go with Amico. All right. Well, unless you guys have any other matchups we want to go over, I mean, we have plenty of time to do more as we go through and get closer to the draft. And we're going to be starting our World Juniors previews soon too. So we might be talking a bit about these other 2025, whoever does make some of these World Junior teams. But yeah, it's going to be fun to see how these all matchups kind of go once the draft gets going. All right, well let's back up the truck and talk about a few of the previous drafts. We talked about the 2024 draft and the 2023 draft last week, or Dayton and I did. We're going to back up to the 2022 draft, and this gets a bit more interesting when you see a bunch more sample, and some of these guys are already in the NHL. Some of them have moved on to the pro leagues and the AHL. So there's a lot more of a time to kind of see where these guys are at. So let's start with our top 10 and talk about how they're kind of doing right now. Overall, 30 players from the 2022 draft have played at least one NHL game, which is okay. I mean, that's a pretty decent number a few years down the road already here. So our top 10 of that draft, of course, Yuri Slafkovsky went first overall. Some people were kind of surprised by that when that Shane Wright was the kind of the first overall pick generally most of the season, but dropped to fourth. Simone Nemec, second overall. Logan Cooley was third. Cutter Gauthier was fifth, ahead of or behind Shane Wright. David Jiricek, sixth. Kevin Korchinski at seven. Marco Kasper at eight. Matt Savoy at nine. And Pavel Minchukov at 10. Of course, Savoy is not with the Buffalo Sabres anymore. He's now with the Edmonton Oilers. So I mean that's different. Cutter Gauthier also not with the Flyers. He's with the Ducks. So there are a few changes in where these guys were drafted, and they're playing with different teams. So I'll start with you, Peter. What do you think about this top 10 a few years in NHL? I mean, all of them have played NHL games at this point. Some of them more than others. Matt Savoy's only played one. The rest of the guys have played a handful or more. So, what do you think of this top 10 so far?
Um, it's there's still a lot to be determined about that of where these players are going to end up. I think you could kind of make the case about Simon Nemec and Logan Cooley, where they have kind of slowly cemented themselves further up within the lineups of their respective teams. The New Jersey Devils, they needed help on the fence. Nemec came up last season, fit the role very well, and he's kind of gone back and forth this season again with the Devils, so he's still teetering on that, but you know exactly what you're trying to prep him for in terms of being a top four defender for that team. So don't want to rush him. Logan Cooley, I think he was one of the top. I mean, he was one of the top rookies last year in
Mhm.
terms of production. You already know what you're getting with him. Impressive campaign, 44 points in 82 games, 11 and 16 right now. So, you know, production is still there. Utah is still on that verge of, still trying to be competitive without trying to fall further in the standings. Their team looks a little bit more competitive right now, so that's impressive. Um, I mean, some other names like, David Jiricek starting to make it. I'm curious to see how this is going to play out between Jiricek and Kevin Korchinski, because Jiricek has kind of found a bit of a more, or carved himself a bit of a role, more so with the Columbus Blue Jackets. But Korchinski, I believe, got sent down to the Rockford Ice Hogs this season, and he hasn't played a game yet this season. So it's interesting to see how the roles have kind of reversed for both defenders, where one is in the NHL last season, the other spent most of the time in the AHL, and that's kind of reversed for both players right now. So kind of shows that maybe Korchinski has a lot more to work on in terms of his overall game, especially with his play away from the puck. We know how great he is offensively to try and rush the puck up and be an offensive defender. Jiricek is more of a two-way steady defensive stalwart, but has that offensive side as well. So really want to see how that could play out. And for me, Yuri Slafkovsky, the verdict is still out on him being number one. Um, it looked like last season was kind of like that breakout performance, much better than his rookie campaign, 50 points in 82 games, but still seeing a little bit of that, hesitation in his game sometimes. He has 11 points, 1 goal on 18 shots. You think if you're the Montreal Canadiens, you would like him to try to utilize that a little bit more and be more of that threatening power forward, menacing type of player that you drafted him to be, and you're still quite not seeing that at this point. I mean, he's got 37 hits, but I think you just want to see him to be a little bit more play driven and less letting the play come to him a little bit more. So those are my thoughts, especially within the top, half of that draft. Everything else is still trying to play itself out, but that's what I take from that 2022 draft so far.
Yeah, it's a thing with Korchinski. Like he has played 10 games with the Rockford Ice Hogs this season. It's a -9. It was a -39 with the Blackhawks last season. So, I mean, plus minus on a bad team, it's kind of interesting to see. Is that bad defensively on his part, or is it just bad defensively as a team? That can, I guess, maybe a bit of both. But yeah, he's got 4 points so far this season, at 15 in the NHL last season. I mean, the Blackhawks added a lot of veteran guys in the offseason at free agency, so maybe pushed him out of the lineup. I mean, he's still really young. He's only 20. So, I mean, he's still a pretty big part of the team. But yeah, Jiricek is now seems to be a regular on the Blue Jackets this season after playing 43 games last season. Has played as an assist in 5. He's -2. I mean, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that development kind of goes, right? So, and then you look at like Mintyukov, who's a regular on the Ducks already too. So, yeah, the defense is interesting. I mean, they're all playing in the NHL except Korchinski. I've all seen NHL games, but except for him, they're all playing right now in the league. So it's interesting to see. Dayton, what about you? Any other thoughts about the top 10 so far?
I think it's a relatively solid top 10. Definitely not like groundbreaking, I guess. Um, there are some stars that are emerging from that group. We mentioned Logan Cooley. He's doing great. Yuri Slafkovsky is emerging as one of the better picks of the draft. He is almost at a point per game with the Montreal Canadiens, who have really been struggling this year. Um, Simon Nemec has been great with the Devils, filling in where it's needed. Yeah, and then there's some really interesting guys kind of filling out that rest of the top 10. Mintyukov is being, one of Anaheim's top guys. Matthew Savoy is doing really well, I think. Yeah, doing very well in Bakersfield, 8 points in 12 games. Marco Casper, he's in the NHL after, 2 points in 2 games with the Grand Rapids Griffins this year. A lot of guys who haven't quite hit that, that NHL stride yet, but they're so close that it's really interesting to see them kind of come into their own. And a lot of them seem to be hitting.
It's true. Like all the guys have played a pretty good amount of games, except like Savoy. He's the only guy that's played only one. And that was a very, very short. I think he played like 5-6 minutes with the Sabres in that first NHL game. He didn't play a lot. So yeah, we'll see when he gets into the NHL with the Oilers at some point. I mean, I had a pretty good training camp, but didn't make the team. And he's off to a good start in the AHL. So we'll see how that kind of goes on the team he wasn't drafted by. So and the same with Goche, who hasn't had a goal this season yet, and I think he's playing like top 6 minutes. So that's maybe an interesting thing to kind of watch, how long that takes before he gets going. All right, let's the rest of the first round. There's a few different names, of course. A lot of them haven't played in the NHL yet, and quite a few are just not many games. So the rest of the first round, you're looking at the highest amount of games is Ivan Shevchenko with 21 games. Coming up behind him is Connor Geekie with 14. The rest of them are below that. So Dayton, what do you think about the rest of the first round? Any standouts? Anything you're kind of maybe disappointed by some of the players to start here?
I don't know if I'm disappointed. I think I'm more so intrigued with some of the guys that were just outside of that top 10. Connor Geekie is playing in the NHL this season, which I'm a little surprised with. Like he always had NHL size, but he needed to work on that all-around game. His skating was a little weaker. And then with the Swift Current Broncos last season, he was kind of a wrecking ball. He would just kind of post up in front of the net, and you couldn't move him. He was so solid, and he just smashed pucks in, and he made them a really intimidating team. Um, so to see him make the transition so quickly, though, is kind of surprising, and I like that. Denton Mateychuk is playing his first season in the AHL, and he has 11 points in 13 games as a defenseman.
Hmm.
So he is continuing to be one of the better puck movers from the blue line this year. Joachim Kemmel, again, another year in the AHL, but he's almost a point per game. Liam Bixel is back in the AHL after spending a year in Sweden. He's looking much better. So, yeah, just a lot of guys that are, making good progress. Even someone like Sam Rinzel, who I think received a lot of criticism when he was picked. He wasn't expected to be a first round selection. Um, and he has 10 points in 10 games with Minnesota, the University of Minnesota. So he's also doing quite well. It's a pretty solid first round. Not a lot of misses from from what I'm looking at. Um, yeah, everyone's made strides this season. No one's really dropped off. It's a it's a good group.
Mm. There's a lot of like Maverick Lamoureux, who just played his first NHL game not that long ago. He's now in his ninth. He's played 9 games now, has 2 points.
Pretty good.
And he was a guy that we were like, I don't know about drafting in the first round because he's big. That's pretty much all he could bring. But he's definitely shown a lot more since. And maybe was worth a first round pick. I mean, he's looked pretty good in the NHL to start here. All right, Peter, what about you for the rest of the first round? Anyone you want to kind of talk about more here?
Yeah, anytime I get a chance to talk about Frank Nazar, I'm going to talk about Frank Nazar because during that draft when Chicago was coming up, I know I basically called that pick. I'm like, I don't know, Chicago coming up after that trade with Ottawa, kind of seems like they would go with the Frank Nazar was on the board, and lo and behold, Chicago took Frank Nazar. So I'm going to toot my own horn there and say I predicted that and called that to happen because that rarely happens. So, but overall, I mean, as a rookie, he's fourth overall in AHL scoring with 11 points in 10 games, 4 goals, 7 assists. He got some NHL experience last season after you're signed out of college. Obviously, don't want to thrust them into any kind of position where maybe they're not in the spot to succeed. But I think one seasoning in the AHL, maybe a little bit more after that, he could find himself in the NHL very regularly because again, the skill that he possesses, I mean, would complement Connor Bedard very, very well. Then again, there are a lot of players on that in their system right now that could move up and, be a factor on that top line with him. So, shout out to him because he's doing very well in his first AHL season. The other one I want to talk about is, and this is kind of a careful what you wish for kind of situation because that Rucker McGorty trade with the Winnipeg Jets and Pittsburgh Penguins, he wanted to make the NHL. He looked okay during the preseason. He made it out of camp. 3 games in, got sent back down as if, yeah, it's not good enough. You got to work on a lot of things. So in his mind, yeah, he wanted out of Winnipeg. I don't know. There were probably a multitude of possible reasons why he wanted out of there. But if he wanted to make the NHL full time, it's going to have to wait a little bit longer because you came in, you had a good camp, didn't quite stick out or stand out to maintain your spot, and now you're back in AHL where you didn't kind of want to be.
Mhm.
So that's a little bit interesting right there. He definitely has a lot of potential to be a very strong power forward. We've seen how he could put the puck in the back of the net. He's got that edge, that physicality, great leadership and character guy. He just wasn't really ready this time around, and he's got a lot to work on in order to get to that next step. So, um, yeah, I don't. This isn't the last time we're going to hear of him or see of him. He's going to come back and with the vengeance at some point. He just needed to work on some time and he maybe kind of rushed himself a little bit into that spot.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard anything that he's complained about being in the AHL. And he definitely has some development to do. And the Penguins are, I don't know where they are really. I mean, what they're thinking of doing. They're struggling to start the season. There's been talk about trades, and there's the talk they don't want to do anything because they don't want to be rebuilding with Crosby because Crosby said he didn't. That's not what he wants. To be on a team like that. So yeah, it's gonna be a balance of see what they're gonna do. And McGroarty is, I think, still a big part of their future. It's just he has some development to do, and that's the case with a lot of these guys in the draft. I'll mention Jonathan Lekramacky because he just had his first NHL game. Great. Of course, I mentioned that last episode with him, his great start in the AHL with 5 goals in his first bunch of games there. And he came up to the NHL. He's playing on the top line with JT Miller and Pius Suter. Looked really good in his first game. Had one really good chance that he could have scored on the power play, but of course, the goalie made a great save on him. And then now he's going to end up being he's getting a lot of time. He had 14 minutes in his first game, and Tocchet was really impressed with his two-way game, and that he wants him to still be creative, but he has that defensive conscience about him that he's not afraid to, play him in all situations, which is great for a young player. So we'll see how many games he gets. But Lekramaki's after a bit of a scare maybe for that season after where he was dealing with injuries and he wasn't very productive. He's back to what everyone was seeing in him in the 2022 draft with that great shot and offensive instinct. So I'm really excited to see what he can do in the next whatever amount of time he is in the NHL, and then whatever time he does play back in Abbotsford. So Lekramacky looks like a pretty good pick at 15th overall in this draft here. All right, rest of the draft, beyond the first round, the guy that has the most NHL games, and that is Matthew Poitras with 47 games. Of course, had that great season last year. He was sent down to the AHL. I don't know. I don't think he's been called back up. He was sent down, but he hasn't played any games there. So, but again, regardless, he's been really good for a second round pick, and he's got the most games out of everyone. Beyond that, the next guy up is with 18 games, and that is Lane Hutson. And we all know how good he is. So I'll start with you, Dayton. What about the rest of the draft? What are you looking at? I mean, the one guy that really sticks out, of course, the two guys, Matthew Poitras and Lane Hutson, beyond the first round. Have any thoughts about the rest of the guys' development so far here?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about those two guys. They've, really exceeded expectations. Though, did Hudson really exceed expectations? People were saying he should have been a first round pick.
Yeah.
And other people are silly and didn't want to pick him.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. I'll bring up two guys. The Arizona Coyotes, now Utah, selected Maximilian Zuber in the 6th round. He already has an NHL game under his belt, mostly out of necessity because they had some real struggles with defense last year. But he is putting together a underratedly solid campaign with the Tucson Roadrunners this season. 4 points in 6 games, 8 penalty minutes. Like he's He's a big, solid defenseman. Was really good for the German World Junior team a few years back. Uh, he could become like a third, maybe second pairing guy, just one of those shutdown guys who has some puck movement skills. You can never really discount those German players coming out of the programs now. They're so well-rounded in almost like everything. The German um, junior hockey programs are really putting out a lot of great players. And then another guy is Stephen Halliday from he is playing with the Belleville Senators right now. He just put up a 3 point, or 3 points in 2 games, which was, yeah, pretty solid. One of the better performances for any player on the Senators, Belleville, that is. And he's kind of emerged as, he was picked as an overage guy and kept performing above expectations in the university level, now in the AHL level. He seems like a really smart pick from the Senators, and I can't always say that for all their picks. I don't know if Senators fans are going to come for me for that one, but uh, I've always been a little bit more lukewarm on some of their late round picks, but this one is showing that he is a really solid addition.
Yeah, I mean, now they've changed. I mean, a lot of it's changed since then with the draft, the guys that are running the draft, right?
Mhm.
So it's going to be interesting to see how the rest come. Now, I mean, maybe some differences in later round picks, but yeah, he's been a good one for the Sens for sure. Peter, what about you for the rest of the draft? Anyone that kind of sticks out to you as being a standout or someone you're kind of watching?
Yeah, I'm gonna go to the New York Rangers and Victor Mancini,
Hmm.
who played 9 games this season and looked really, really good. Got his first goal, 4 points in 9 games, was sent back down to, the AHL and the Hartford Wolfpack, but you know, Peter Laviolette said that this is an indictment on him about his like him being a bad like his play is bad or anything like that. Is they want to get him more opportunities, and it's not a
Hmm.
slight on him at all. And that's really that's encouraging for Mancini, the Rangers, that they got a defender coming up through the system that should anything happen, like if they move on from, who knows what's going to happen with Jacob Trouba.
Hmm.
I'm not throwing any rumors out there, but like maybe they do move on from K. Miller or something like that. You have a defender like Victor Mancini that could jump into the system. Who played really, really well in the 9 games that he's played so far. So you have that reassurance right there that if moves do happen, you have someone to fall back on. And even in that one game that he played against the Toronto Maple Leafs, I was really impressed with his mobility, his decision making, and looked very strong. And the other one I'm going to mention is, I am going to be a little bit of a homer here because I have been a big fan of his ever since he got drafted, and that's Nikita Grabenkin.
Yeah.
You know, I ever since he won the KHL Cup and he signed his contract, and even before then, I'm telling people, don't sleep on Grabenkin,
Mhm.
don't sleep on Grabenkin. Comes over to North America, had a really strong prospect showdown against the Montreal Canadiens, looked really good in preseason. Again, some hiccups here and there. That's the whole growing process of a player coming from Europe over to North America. But he's looking great so far. 9 points in 11 games
Hmm.
with the Toronto Marlies right now. I think if there's going to be a point where if he continues to excel in a top six role with that team and the Maple Leafs could use some depth scoring, he's a player that they could probably call up and be like, you know what? Hey, you've
Hmm.
done a really great job in the AHL. Now let's see what you could do with some game time right here. So, really came away with impressed with those two players with how they started off at different levels, but they got some promise and potential that they could be key factors for their respective teams going forward.
Yeah, Grommenkin's been really good in the AHL to start, and I think it's just a matter of time before he gets that call up. But it depends on injuries and stuff like that for the Maple Leafs. Of anyone that has chances, that's why Lekramaki's in the NHL, because Brock Besser's injured. So it's opportunity. You
Yeah.
play well, you're the first name that they call up if they need someone with an offensive, a bit of an offense more than defense, more of a fourth liner. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see when he gets his first chance and how he looks. But he's been really good in his first season so far. I'll be a homer, and I always seem to be whenever I pick prospects in here. I'm going to mention two defensemen that the Canucks picked in this draft, and that's Kirill Kudryavtsev and Elias Pettersson. So I mean, these two guys are both in the AHL with Abbotsford now. And they're both looking really good to start the season. Kudryavtsev has 4 points in 11 games to start his pro career after with the Sioux Greyhounds having a couple seasons with some really good numbers. 47 points last season, 50 points a previous one. Technically could still be sent back as an overage player, just like Josh Bloom was last season. So that may happen, but right now it's looking like he's looking pretty good in the AHL to start. And Elias Pettersson had a few games last season at the end of the season there when he came over from overseas. He's 13 games, 3 points. He's a +3. He's not usually known as an offensive presence. He's more of that two-way guy, and he's looked at pretty well in Abbotsford to start the season. So those two guys, later round picks, third round pick, Pettersson, and a 7th round pick, Kudryavtsev. That's pretty good for two D-men in the 2022 draft. And along with Lakovic, this draft is looking pretty good for the Canucks to start. I mean, as it's going right now, I mean, yeah, they haven't had a lot of NHL time, but they're on the right track being in the AHL and beyond here. So I'm very impressed with those three guys from the 2022 class. All right, these ones could be obvious because we already have probably one in mind as being a steal in this draft. So Peter, do you have anyone that you think is an early steal a few years into or beyond this draft being held?
I see. Here's the thing. I know I was really high on Owen Beck as a first rounder. I think Montreal getting him at the top of the second round as their first pick is going to be fantastic because he plays that, energetic, responsible game. Really in your face, has a great shot to boot, great playmaking abilities. Really thought he could have been a first rounder. That just seems like another money pick for them, just like, Lane Hudson was later on in that draft. But I'm gonna focus in on Isaiah George for the New York Islanders, and they're already starting to come away impressed with his play early on. I know he's only played in 2 games, but they don't need him to be a top point producer. He could always elevate his game, and the points could come later on. But he's holding his own. He's a very strong two-way player, strong in transition. He's very mobile for his size. Kind of like a whole package defender. Again, the offensive game may start to pop off at some point later on in his career. But right now, he's just trying to make his mark on the team. And considering that the New York Islanders are that middle of the pack tier team right now, they need some consistency, and he's providing that for them right now. So I thought he probably could have been a little bit higher up in the draft, maybe a 3rd round pick. Them getting him in the 4th round or at the top of the 4th round is looking pretty strong right now if he's already making that impact. And he just finished off, last season winning the OHL championship with the London Knights, fell short of that Memorial Cup. So the fact that he's already getting games in the NHL right now is very promising for his career, and I'm a big fan of that.
Dayton, what about you? Anyone is looking like an early steal?
I mean, I'll go with the obvious, Lane Hudson.
Yes. Yeah, I say that's
that too.
Must I say more? He's been incredible. Like, he's done exactly what people expected him to do. And he was what, a 3rd round, 4th round pick? I just don't have the list up in front of me, but
second round.
Was he second round?
Second.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought he
second,
dropped a little further than that. Yeah, but he's going to be, I think, in contention for the Calder Trophy if Montreal can kind of get a little bit of momentum. So he's been fantastic. Easy steal.
Yeah. Well, we already knew. I think we mentioned that right when he was drafted, or like it was close to the 3rd round. Like it was late in the 2nd. I mean, we were kind of like, why isn't Lane Hudson off the board yet? Why isn't he drafted? And Montreal, I think, was a perfect spot for him to go, and he's looked great. I mean, he says one of the higher Minutemen for the Canadians this season. Probably one, I think he's been over 23, 24 minutes. So yeah, he's been great, and showing a lot of those same attributes that, I mean, not at that high of a level yet, He may not get there. It's pretty high to say Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, but he has those same attributes that you see on the ice. So it's going to be interesting to see the rest of his career what he can do. Definitely a steal for sure. All right, well, let's do our prospects of the week to finish the show. Peter, who do you got as a prospect of the week?
I am going back to the London Knights, as you know, I mentioned with Isaiah George, and I'm going to pick Sam Dickinson. Last 3 games, he has 8 points, but it's what he did in those 3 games that got him or vaulted him to the top of the standings as a top defenseman or top scoring defenseman in the OHL. Against the Sioux on the 6th of December, he had 2 points, goal and assist. Had a hat trick against North Bay, and then he followed that up with another 3-point game against the Guelph Storm. You know me, I was in Sam Dickinson's corner in that draft. I thought he was probably one of the more complete, close to NHL ready defenders because of the size, the skill, the awareness, the two-way game that he possessed, and he's just taking the OHL by storm from the back end. And this is the second time this season where he's had a hat trick and a 3-assist game as well. So he's putting up the points big time for the London Knights. They're still going to probably be a powerhouse because they got all their core players or key players back from training camps like Dickinson, like Denver Barkey, like Oliver Bonk, like Easton Cowan. But it's hard not to overlook what Dickinson is doing right now with 25 points in 15 games so far and what he did this past week. So he's my prospect of the week.
Yeah, it's a good one. The Sharks are probably excited to see. He's going to be a cornerstone of that team defense for a long time, I think. They've I think they're set with him especially getting him in the same draft, Macklin Celebrini. Yeah, pretty good. Dayton, what about you for a prospect of the week?
Well, I thought I'd stick with the 2022 draft since that's what we've been talking about for a while. And Liam Ogren had a hat trick on the 9th, which is pretty good. I'm going to pick Fraser Minton as my prospect of the week, though. He was an early second-round pick for the Maple Leafs. He was selected from the Kamloops Blazers, ended up going to the Saskatoon Blades, almost helped them win a championship, but the Moose Jaw Warriors had other things to say about that. He made his AHL debut this week, last week. Played on the 9th, put up an assist, played on the 10th, put up another assist, and then on the 13th scored his first AHL goal. So he's 3 points, 3 games. That's awesome. Prospect of the week.
Yeah, he's another one that he's been really good in the last few training camps with the Maple Leafs too. Almost made the team a few times. So
if it weren't for that high ankle sprain, he would have made the team this year. I probably would have guaranteed it.
Yeah, I agree. And he had a great preseason until he got hurt, unfortunately. But yeah, he could be another guy that's on the call-up list for injuries happen. Yeah, and there's a few guys on the Marlies actually that are looking pretty good to start the season. So we'll see who's first, either Grabenkin or Minton. Who's going to be up first as the first call-up from there. So we'll see. All right. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Dayton, for coming on, talking prospects. I won't do a prospect of the week because it was going to be Lekramaki, so I already talked about him. So that wasn't much more to say about. I hopefully scored his first NHL goal tonight as playing the Islanders. Maybe he'll score against his former captain of the Canucks, Bo Horvat. So we'll see what happens there. But make sure to check out everything at thehockeybears.com about prospects from all of our writing teams. And of course, the World Juniors is coming up really quick. I mean, it's still a bit away, but our coverage will start pretty quick as the rosters start getting talked about and predictions and all that stuff, fun stuff. Yeah, make sure you're checking out everything and the Substack and all of our stuff over at the site. But until our next episode, we will see you next time.